I'm Sharooz, welcome to my studio in London. This is my cave of backward technology. So this is where sort of a lot of the EEPROM drum machines are, and some of the general rarities that don't get used too much, and obviously the Korg Volcas, which do get used quite a bit. There's the Korg Rhythm 55B, which is a relatively new acquisition. The Drumulator, drum tracks, the MXR 185, the 626, the Roland, and the Korg Super Drums, and this old Soundmaster SR55 here, which SR88 rather, which is like kind of like a Boss DR55 rip-off. A lot of this stuff does get used actually, because you can MIDI clock like the Drumulator and the drum tracks. It's kind of hard to do, but some of these kick drums are really, really nice. Like, the unfortunate thing about this is there's only like 4 pads, so you're kind of limited to how much you can jam in real time. But the sequencer that comes with it's really good, and you can like assign different sounds to each pad, so you can like change like the clap to like a tom. So there's like, I love the toms in this. It's been used a lot. This was the drum machine that got used in a lot of Depeche Mode tracks. Everything Counts, and it's been, I think it was used in like Say 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 with Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney did, and some Shaka Khan stuff. So yeah, it's a cool little machine. The Korg Rhythm 55, it's kind of like a poor man's CR8000, I suppose. But you can't program it, but you can get some really cool little presets that, really analog and like 8-bit sounding. The hi-hats are really cool. You can change the patterns, but that's about all you can do with it. Nice cowbell. This does actually get used a bit, like the kick drum. And the click. The click's really nice. It's got this crappy little swing on it. Yeah, the kick and the snare are the best bit. I mean, there's not really... I've sampled it all out, and other than that, there's not really a great deal of use in it. I've heard that it's been used on some old classic tracks, like Hall & Oates and stuff. But I haven't really used it that much, to be honest. It gets occasionally bring it in for the kick drum. So this is the Korg Super Drums, like another crappy like 8-bit thing. I mean, it's quite good fun for the snares and claps occasionally. I've never really tried to program it, to be honest. I've sampled it, I got it, picked it up in some junk shop somewhere in North London. And yeah, it's, it's good for sampling single hits, and that's about all that gets any use for. Moving on to this, the Roland TR626. This is like, this actually gets used a lot. I've used the snare drum on a lot of tracks, and the kick's quite cool as well. It's got like a Stock Aitken Waterman feel, which may or may not be a good thing, but it's not really a sought after Roland. It's one of those ones that most people kind of dismissed, but it has got some cool like digital samples in it. And yeah, the clap and snare probably get the most use out of anything. There was an era, like some 90s techno stuff uses it a bit, but other than that, there's not really much it gets used for in my setup, to be honest. This is the MXR 185. It's a bit of a rare beast. You don't get to see these too often. This was a recommendation actually from a friend of mine in LA, a guy called Amir Derek, who plays in a band called Julian K. And I'd seen what he did with it and some of the sounds on his record, and I thought, I've got to get one of these. It's got some like really thick sounds actually. Like the toms and the snare are wicked. I hate the clap. And you can do this really cool thing where like you can pitch individual sounds. You can like... which is really cool. It's really hard to sync it. It just doesn't talk to anything else. So I just like take samples out of it and just process them and cut them up and stuff. Moving on to the drum tracks. A lot of people know this. A lot of people have used these. It's syncs the MIDI clock, so it sits with the rest of the setup. It's got a really good shaker actually, and clap. The clap's so sick. You can tune everything individually. Yeah, it's got just a combination of really cool sounds. It's got a really nice sequencer in it. Doesn't get used that much nowadays, but like I'll take individual sounds off it sometimes, or maybe run it in sync with like all this stuff. And then like the only recent thing here in this area would be the Korg Volcas, which are really good. They've been a big part of my setup recently. Part analog. They sync really nicely, really cool sequencer. This like 303 style one has some great little tweaks in it. It's got like a great analog oscillator in there, and some great effects in the drum box. You can like put this crazy stutter delay thing on everything, which just lasts forever. And the keys is just crazy random. Like you just sync it with everything else, and it kind of just does what it wants, but in a really cool musical way. So they get used a lot. They're really cool for like taking live and stuff because they're light and they work off batteries. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the main bulk of where most of my work is carried out. This is where we've got the TR909, the TR808, the TB303, the TR606, the 707, the SH101 and the MPC60, and they're all linked together via MIDI clock and a series of DIN sync and external triggers in. So it's quite a cool computer-free sequencing setup. I normally begin by sending MIDI clock from this aging old MPC60, which just has really rock solid timing. I set the tempo in here, 122 BPM, and I send a clock to the rest of the machines via a couple of sync boxes here. So if I hit play, you'll hear a kick drum, which I've already programmed in, and some hi-hats on the 808. Put a snare in. And from here, I'm using the accent part of it to trigger the SH101 via the clock in. I've already loaded a pattern in there. Let's just start like filtering it out. Put in like a clap. And then I can start to bring like other instruments in. Like the 909. And the 707. Bringing bits in and out just to add like a bit of a groove. Like change the oscillators in here. Get like 606 in. You can even use the sounds of the MPC60. If you want to record it in, you could just like overdub. And then when you get bored of that, you can go back and start with the 303. So what I would normally do, instead of clearing the patterns, I just turn volumes down on everything and just start a totally new groove. I would always start with the 808 because I just love the sound of it. Turn this off. It's a little pattern I put in earlier on. I'm going to use like 606 hi-hats for this. You need like 4 hands to do this properly. But it sounds wicked once you get it going. And all the while, this is sending MIDI clocks, so you can like change the tempo and pull in like different bits of like swing and different sounds from this. And this is like, I don't really use it that much anymore. It's got a really cool sampler in it, but I inherited a bunch of sounds that like Masters at Work had. I bought it off a guy in Wrexham, and he was in a pretty big DJ duo at the time called King Unique. I think they were called Funk Force back then, and he had like 200 discs full of like Masters at Work sounds, and they're really good. Really punchy and great for sampling, but you have to use like these old floppy disks, which you just can't get them anymore. Well, they're really hard to get hold of. So that's the MIDI clock setup. Okay, so this is where I do my sequencing, audio editing, and MIDI editing. I'm using Cubase 7.5, which I've used Cubase for as long as I can remember. It's just the perfect audio editor. I love the effects that come with it. The compressors, the reverbs, the multi-band compression, it's just really solid. And in reality, it's the kind of like the best tape machine ever. It's so efficient at time stretching and cutting things up, taking live audio and just, putting it, just allowing me to edit it quickly. It doesn't get in the workflow. It feels like an instrument. So Cubase 7.5, monitoring, I've got the Focal Twin 6s and the Yamaha NS10s. I run the NS10s off a quad amp, which I think they just makes them sound really nice and big and sweet. And I never really used to pay much attention actually to which amp powered the NS10s, but I've got a friend over in New York, a guy called Dean Coleman, who's a fantastic all-round gearhead, and he basically introduced me to this quad amp and showed me how much better it would make everything sound. So it really does make a difference, and the majority of the mixing is actually done on the NS10s. The Focals come in like at the last minute just to check the bass, and they're just about the best speakers I've found for small midfields that just replay everything that's going on, really. So the bottom end's wicked, and they're just really good. Got the MPC 60, which I mentioned before. That's kind of like, I still use that a lot. It's 12-bit. I just sample into it, and just is really gritty, and you're really limited in what you can do. I mean, you can only have like maybe 32 sounds in there, but all my drums go through it, and it really does make a difference. Before I do anything in here, before I go to battery or anything like that, I always go through the MPC-60, and I've got loads of kits set up in here that were all sampled through that. I've got a bunch of hardware here. The SSL bus compressor, which goes right across the mix. You tend to mix into it. I tend to bring it in at the last minute when everything's already doing its thing, and then I just add a little bit of compression. It's got this glue. They call it the glue. It just fits everything together and just makes everything basically sound like it should be on the radio. Below it, the DBX 165. That's like a mono vintage compressor, really good for bass, live bass. I use the Fender a lot through that, and vocals. So this is my main kind of, I suppose, workstation controller keyboard, the Korg Kronos. It's got all like the classic Korg sounds in it, and a bunch of really good pianos and stuff, and obviously the M1 organ. I don't use that sound, but like a lot of people do now, and the pianos are really good. Like you know, I do a lot of production for various artists. I've just done the Lives record, and we used a lot of the pianos for that. It's really just the best sounding pianos, to be honest. So that gets used a bit for that. A few toys up here which occasionally get used, like the Critter and Guitari. Is that what it's called? Pocket piano. It's quite cool just for like, it sends out MIDI clock, and it's got this little speaker. You can like change the arpeggiator. You can tell it what, like, change the sound here. Someone described it as like a posh doorbell. I think it's a lot more than that. You can get some really good sounds out of it. Sometimes I mic it up, but it sends really cool MIDI clock, and it can integrate into the setup that way. I've got the Teenage Engineering OP1, which gets used as a sketch pad. I mean, this is like one of the most unique things I've played with in recent years. It's got really cool drum sounds in it. The drum sounds that come with it are really good. I've also put a few of my own like 909 and 808 sounds in there. Gives everything like a really gritty feel. You can sample off the radio on it, which is really cool as well. I think that's Annie Mac. And then it's got like a bunch of synths with like really cool like control parameters here. This sound I use a lot. It sounds like I suppose like a more analog sounding Silent, really. It's got this really cheesy piano, but I love it. It's got this tape machine where you can just like record everything you've done, and it's got a little metronome and stuff. It's really cool. I take it traveling with me a lot, and you know, I just like when I'm in a hotel or on a train or something, I just mess around with it, and you can just USB your ideas out of it into the laptop. It's good. Got the Access Virus Snow TI there. That doesn't get that much use anymore. I think it's a great synth, but it's kind of been rinsed a bit. It's been used a lot by various artists, and you know, occasionally use it. Nord drum, big part of my setup. Analog drum, real analog drum machine. It's the Mark 1. It's got some really unique sounds in it, really. I think you need the pads to get the most out of it, but I've used like loads of claps out of this. Yeah, it gets quite a lot of use. Got these old Boss, cheap old Boss guitar pedals here. They're all patched in down here, so I can like add them to anything. Like I can shoot plugins out of the computer through the patch bay into the Boss distortions and then back in. And you can just totally, I mean, they sound really cheap and nasty, but it's a really good effect to be able to have. This Big Eye pedal is probably the best one. I got this in Korea. It's just a really nasty distortion, and it's only got like one knob that just filths everything up. Sometimes I put drums through it as well. It's really good for that. Down here we've got the Focusrite. I I think it's the ISO 430. That's the channel which I do all the, like when I was doing the vocals for the Lives record, that was just my go-to vocal chain. The stressor, which I've only just got one of them. A lot of people use them in stereo. I just use them on kicks and snares in mono. It's a great sounding. Adds this brilliant punch and slam to everything. It's got a little tape and distortion emulator in here. The sound card I use, the Prism Orpheus, it's really good. I think when you're using this much analog gear, you really do need to have the cleanest possible AD and also DA, and it gives me just really crystal clear. It just captures everything without coloring it. Sometimes I sample it back into itself. Like it actually gives like a really cool warm effect. The preamps in it are really good. TL Audio EQ down here, which doesn't really get that much use, and various MIDI interfaces. I've got like 3 MIDI interfaces going through the computer at once because there's so much gear to have to midify. Analog 4s is the most recent acquisition. Haven't really used it that much yet. It's quite deep, but it's got really nice sounds in it. The presets are really good. And I use it, at the moment I'm using it just as like a module. So I just control it from here, and you can play right into it, use the sequencer in it. It's got really nice filters for a lot of sounds. And actually that free bass preset, I've used that one a lot, just tweaked it up and put different filters and distortions on it. And the only other thing here, the Fender Jazz Bass, which occasionally gets used, I just plug it straight into the Focusrite and use it that way, just bits of plucks and slaps. And yeah, that's about it for the front panel. So this is my 80 stack, the DX7, the Juno 106 and the Jupiter 6. This doesn't get used that much. It's it's kind of a joke. But I've got a buddy who absolutely loves these things, and sometimes you can get cool sounds out of cartridges. Like some people have been known to get patches out of librarians and shoot them in via SysX. That's a step too far for me. But sometimes I use like some of these drones like for intros. I'm sure that's not how it was meant to be used. But it's occasionally like for pads and strings and stuff. It's you can get some good sounds. It's good for like old ravey sounds actually. It reminds me a lot of like the old rave era. The Juno 106. This gets used on almost everything. This is like my go-to. There's like the for bass, for leads, chords, everything. I've got some of my favorite presets loaded in. And it sounds really good, like when you're doing chords and bass lines. So definitely the most, in my opinion, underrated synth of all time. I'd be lost without it. The chorus is really nice. Really nice filter. You've got this like noise generator, which when you filter it up, this has been used on basically every track I've ever done for bass. It's all MIDI'd up, so I just like recorded in via Cubase for the MIDI, and sometimes load patches in, store a lot of my own stuff. Really nice, good for like low pads as well, like that kind of stuff. Intros, cheesy like 80s horror. Yeah, like I say, go-to synth for everything. They break down a lot, but if you're willing to have them serviced regularly, it's definitely a really good instrument to have. This is the Jupiter 6. It's probably used, second to the Juno 106, used more than anything in my setup. They're really hard to come by. I absolutely love it. It's just so filthy and 80s and analog. It's, for me, the best synth Roland ever made. I absolutely love it. I use it a lot for like low pads and drones and stuff. It's got great unison mode. You can split the keyboard in two, which is really cool. And the first preset, the first factory preset that comes with it is just the best thing ever. You've got like this split where you have this like really angry bass on the left hand, and you've got like these really cheesy brass chords on the right. It just leads to all sorts of cool scenarios. The arpeggiator, you can like trigger it via the 909 or 707. Sometimes I do that. It takes MIDI clock, and you can get some really cool effects. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass, obviously, to set up in this day and age, but like, you can get some really unique sounds. Arpeggios are really good in it. Whoa, some of the effects as well. That's not actually even arpeggio. Oh, that is arpeggiated. Love this sound. If you like 80s horror soundtracks, it's perfect. And you can like do crazy stuff like cross mod, sync the oscillators just to get those like 90s break sounds, which I mean don't get used that much these days, to be honest. But it's great being able to do that with the oscillators. It's really powerful. Like you got 4 oscillators per channel, and for sound design, it's you can do some really cool stuff with it. Pads are really nice. The classic rave pad. Got like all the oscillators going at once there, more or less. Yeah, so I'd say it's probably my favorite thing in here. So this is my bass stack. This is basically where most of my bass lines, a lot of my bass lines come from. The Pro 1, the ARP Odyssey Mark II, and the Nord Lead 3. The Nord Lead it's really easy to program. It's got really cool FM and loads of different waveform options in there. It's got great filters. You can sync the LFOs to MIDI clock. I usually have it clocked. I have these arpeggios which I've programmed over the years, which are set to a MIDI clock. Which just sound really glitchy and cool. And I've done like loads of my own presets. This one I've used in a bunch of my tracks. It's really nice. It's got really, really good resonance on the filters. Really nice little acidy sounds in it. Most people don't use it like this. Like most people I've seen that use the Nord Lead do like pads and leads with it, but I use it mainly for bass. And the oscillator modulation is what causes like the crazy glitchy stuff. You can somehow, I think you just have to like tweak it a bit. You can sync it to clock and it just sounds really good. I've had this thing since it came out. It's one of my go-tos. I've got some like really cool chordy sounds in there as well. Ooh, this one's nice. This one is so cool. I love this sound. It's got like the chord memory. It's the only synth I've got that's actually got like a chord memory button, so you can like play your own chords and just put them in the memory. I think it's at its best when you do sounds like this. I use it a lot for chords too, to be honest. So that's the Nord Lead 3. The only thing it's missing is effects. The Nord Lead 4 has that. I should upgrade it. Sequential Circuits Pro 1. Really cool synth. You need a physics degree just to play a saw wave out of it. It's like every time you turn it on, it does something different. Really nice filter. Doesn't have MIDI, so you've got like MIDI CV it, which I do occasionally, or just like play it in, to be honest. I used this on a track of mine, Omega and Fairlight. It did the bass sound for both of those. It's got a really cool arpeggiator as well, which I need to try and figure out. I mainly use it for leads, to be honest. And then we've got the ARP Odyssey, which is another go-to for bass. It's really noisy and temperamental, but obviously no patch memories, but it really is like a bit of a vintage classic. Great filters. LFO, and it's really cool. And it's got this really cool sample hold thing as well, which you can like trigger it and CV gate it and make really good use of the sample hold function to create your own sequences. It's only got 2 oscillators actually, but it's enough. When, you know, the thing about a lot of these things is like, people take like a saw wave out of a soft synth and they expect it to sound the same as like a saw wave out of a Pro 1 or one of these. And I think the thing you've got to sort of understand is like every one of these synths has a totally different sonic character. Like a square wave from this is going to sound totally different from a square wave from the SH-101 or the Juno 106. But yeah, this is like, I haven't really used it on anything yet, but I'm sure it'll find some use. Oh, the noise generator as well, that's really cool. I just need to try and figure out how to get the noise into it. Filters, the high pass filter is really cool too. Oh, there's the noise. Yeah, so that's the ARP Odyssey.